Welcome back. All right, so I talked about Seattle, an updated look at Seattle. Did a video on them early in the season. Well, another team I did a video on roughly a month ago was Boston. I wanted to talk about Boston, an updated look at them as well. The past month, not as strong as their first month of the season, but that's to be expected, right? So when we look at their record, it's currently 17-4-3. Last year, through 24 games, it was 23-1. The previous year, 14-8-2. What that tells you is Boston's been pretty good for a while now. So they ended up 51-26-5 in 2021-2022. Last season, of course, famously and infamously, 65-12-5. A team that then lost in the first round of the playoffs. Now, where they're going to end up this year is anybody's guess. Now, their goal scoring is still right around middle of the pack, 3.33 goals per game. They're 12th overall in the NHL. Their defense has to stay ahead, so 2.46 is the goals against right now, third overall in the NHL. So that has slipped a bit, and we knew it was going to, that the numbers that some teams were putting up early in the season weren't really sustainable. Their power play, 22.8%. That's 10th overall in the NHL. And their penalty kill, first in the NHL at 89%. I don't expect it to stay at 89%, but I certainly didn't expect Boston to be this good, so who knows? So Pasternak's been easily their best forward. In 24 games, 14 goals, 22 assists, 36 points. He is eclipsing Marchand by a lot, and Marchand's had a good run too. 24 games, 11 goals, 12 assists, 23 points. And coming off of a hat trick in their most recent game. So the two veterans that you're counting on for leadership, one that wears the C and another wears the A, have absolutely provided that leadership on and off the ice. Coyle, 24 games, 9 goals, 11 assists, 20 points. I think he continues to do a good job down the middle. So does Zacha, 24 games, 8 goals, 11 assists, 19 points. And they need to continue to perform as first and second line centers, which as the season goes along, well, your body takes it and eventually it can wear a player down. So we'll see how things go. Coyle and Zacha getting more responsibility, I think, than we've seen them have throughout their careers so far. Zacha's young, and Coyle's a guy who there are some who think there's been value there beyond what he was able to provide in previous stops as well as in Boston thus far. And so far this year, he's been good, right? McAvoy, 20 games, 3 goals, 14 assists, 17 points. One of the best young defensemen in the league, absolutely. Van Riemsdyk, 23 games, 5 goals, 11 assists, 16 points. The 16 points is a bit of a surprise, and I mean that in the positive. He's been good. Poitras, 24 games, 5 goals, 6 assists, 11 points. He slowed down after what was an amazing start, but again, you knew that was going to happen. Teams get him on their radar when they start hearing about how well he's playing in the Bergeron, comparison. And, of course, he's a big fan of Jonathan Toews growing up, and that's the style of hockey he plays. Good two-way threat. He's got some offense there as well. Trent Frederick, 24 games, 6 goals, 4 assists, 10 points. Not too bad. Jake DeBrusk probably wants a few more goals. He only has 4 goals, 6 assists, 10 points through 23 games. But overall, the scoring depth's been pretty good. Again, they're just a little bit above average around the NHL. Their goaltending remarkable. Swayman, 9-1-2, 932 save percentage. Now he's in the conversation for the Vezina. Ullmark's dropped back a bit, 8-3-1 with a 918 save percentage, but that's not really a huge surprise. Ullmark had a ridiculous year last year. Everything kind of fell his way. And again, once you get to the first round of the playoffs, that's where reality kind of struck for Boston, which is too bad for me as a Boston fan, but I'm sure for fans of other teams, they're quite happy. So when we look at their most recent struggles, and I want to talk about this too, because there's been a lot of talks about my power rankings. He's too tough on Boston. Well, they had some mediocre games here, and I didn't feel like they were playing like a top-notch team. And I don't know if Boston's going to be a top 5 team at the end of the year, right? So while they have a points percentage that's tied for first overall in the NHL at 771, I don't know if they're going to be there at the end of the year. I don't know that they necessarily have to be. Would you rather see a team be, the number 1 team in the NHL or a top 5 team in the NHL, or a team that's more geared towards winning in the playoffs? So I think for Boston, I think this year we're not going to see them having their foot on the gas the whole year like they did last season. I think we're going to see what we saw here happen probably again. So it started with an overtime loss against Tampa Bay, 5-4 overtime loss. Now before that game, there were a few wins they had where I didn't feel like maybe they had their A game, but they managed to eke out a victory. Part of it being the goaltending is fantastic. Their defense is really good. So all you need is the occasional goal when your defense and goaltending are that good. So Kucherov tied it at 19:55 of the third period, and then Hagel had the overtime winner at 1:19. So that's 2 points that turned into one for Boston, and just not being able to hold down that lead. Then they beat Florida 3-1. It was tied 1-1 in the second period. They were outshot 28-25. They were outplayed in that game, but Ullmark steals it. 27 saves on 28 shots. He was quite good. So again, they do beat Florida, but I felt like Florida played a really good game there, and Boston not necessarily as good. Then they lost against Detroit. Not a lot to say with that one. They trailed 2-0 after the first. They never really got into it, and Detroit's a team that has been a struggle for Boston so far this year. And yeah, I guess it's just a bad matchup for Boston. Then against the Rangers, they lost 7-4. They trailed 2-0. They tied it. Then they were down 3-2 after one. They were down 5-3 after two. Just a sloppy game. And Ullmark, 33 saves on 40 shots. It just was overall the kind of game Boston can't get into. They can't get into this run and gun, fast up and down the ice style, because if they erode their own defense, they're very much less likely to win. And then against Columbus, they lost 5-2. They trailed that one 3-0 after the second, and just there was too much ground that they'd given up. They weren't able to recover that in the third period. Swayman saved 17 out of 19 before being pulled. He wasn't happy about being pulled. No goaltender should be happy about being pulled. Ullmark, 18 saves on 20 shots in relief. So again, those 5 games, definitely some issues for Boston. Now, I saw today Jim Montgomery talking about how they're coming out of it, and I'm not saying they're not. But if we look at these 3 wins, it doesn't necessarily say Boston's back, they're contending. So first off, they win 3-0 against San Jose. Well, San Jose at the time hadn't won a game all season on the road. Now, since then, they've won a couple on the road, right? But Swayman with a 26-save shutout. And again, they beat San Jose 3-0. Okay. Then there's the 4-3 overtime win against Toronto. But what stands out to me in that one is Matthews ties it at 19:54 of the third period. So not unlike this game right here against Tampa Bay, where Boston struggled to protect that lead. Then Marchand scores the overtime winner at 4:52 in what was an absolutely bonkers overtime period. Boston with 11 shots in the overtime, but Toronto also had 5. And so that game really could have gone either way. And then most recently against Columbus, they win 3-1, but they trailed 1-0 after the second period. And it looked like Spencer Martin might steal one from Boston before Marchand put the team on his back and said, I'll do it. And he had the natural hat trick in the third period. So I thought Marchand had a really good game against Columbus. I thought the goaltending kept him in it for as long as it could. But am I still concerned when it comes to Boston? As a fan of Boston, yeah, kind of am. I think this is a team that has shown that if they outwork their opponent, and if they play their style and they dictate the play, they should win those games. But when they're not able to dictate the play, they have a little bit more difficulty. And if they're not getting those goals and they're stuck in those scoreless draws for too long, then you have a bit of a problem, right? So their center depth is worthy of talking about here. Zacha, Coyle, Poitras, and Beecher. And I say this because there is no guy you look at on that list and go, that is a true number one center. I am saying nothing negative about any of the 4 centers. I think Johnny Beecher has been a lot of fun to watch. I think Poitras has the potential to become a number one center in the NHL and could be looked upon as an absolute draft steal for the Boston Bruins years down the road. But Zacha and Coyle, I like them a lot, good work ethic. But did they have somebody that's really, truly replaced Bergeron? No, because nobody can. Nobody can be Bergeron. So I think they've done a really good job of, minus Bergeron and Krejci, finding enough goals and enough points that they've had the victories, and obviously they're on a 3-game winning streak currently. But when you consider Columbus is at the bottom of the East, San Jose is at the bottom of the West, and with Toronto, they needed to score with 8 seconds left in overtime after blowing the lead in the third period, there are still some reasons here to be concerned. Not necessarily saying that, like, oh, Boston's in the tank or anything, but there are definitely some trends here with Boston that Jim Montgomery needs to stay on top of. He is a very good coach. I'm sure that he will. These are the kinds of things that they need to make sure that, you know, the team is aware that, yeah, you got the 3-game winning streak, but, right? And schedules in the NHL, as easy as they might look, and I believe for Boston, their next game's against Buffalo, well, that's a game where Buffalo's desperate, right? And they showed in losses on this board here that they've had some struggles in recent times. So their cap space currently $712,500. I only point that out because this is not a team that's in a position to make any trades. Don Sweeney does not have cap space to make trades unless it's dollar out, dollar in. So what we've got with Boston is this is probably a team that's going to stay as it is right up until the deadline. I do have some concerns about them mortgaging the future at the deadline again. So if this team continues to put up points at, I would say, a 700 points percentage range. So they stay in that 700 range. Right now, it's 771. So I'm just saying, even if they drop down to about 700, it's going to be tempting for them to go all in at the deadline. I would rather that they didn't. I say that because they already have the 2024 first round draft pick is gone. It's top 10 protected. So if it's a top 10 pick, it's theirs. But in all likelihood, they're not getting a top 10 pick this year. And so I'd rather they didn't mortgage more first round picks. They also don't have a second rounder next summer. They don't have a third rounder either. Basically, Don Sweeney, maybe he doesn't like the draft. I don't know. But Boston's been mortgaging their future for a while. And it's almost at the point where I can talk about trades that they've made at the deadline, and we can start pointing out all of the young players that have been sacrificed by Boston in service of trying to win another Stanley Cup. And they haven't won it since 2011. I'm not sure if this team is one that I look at and say, well, they can win the Cup, because the only way that I see this team being able to win the Cup is if the goaltending and the defense stay absolutely rock solid in the playoffs. They'd have to play kind of a modified version of the neutral zone trap. I do think they're playing a similar style to that as well. It can look kind of trappy at times. Again, you can't really get back to that mid-90s, late 90s, early 2000s neutral zone trap because of them taking the red line out. The two-line pass outdid the neutral zone trap. But definitely it feels like they play that kind of style. Now, they're pending UFAs to keep an eye on. You've got Jake DeBrusk, who, again, 4 goals in 23 games. And there are fans that are sold on DeBrusk. There are some that aren't. I think in the event that they're able to improve another part of the team, or if DeBrusk just isn't willing to sign, if they move him at the deadline, I would be perfectly fine with that. Van Riemsdyk, 1-year deal with Boston. I don't think he goes anywhere. Heinen signing the deal with Boston. I think he's been good. I think, if anything, Boston should look to extend Danton Heinen. Grzelcyk on the blue line. There are differing opinions on Grzelcyk. Is Grzelcyk a great defenseman? Is he a mediocre defenseman? Is he a good defenseman? Depends on who you ask. I will say that for the right price, I think keeping Grzelcyk around is important. But this is a team that hasn't been scared about losing players. That really hasn't been nervous about losing a relatively big name. If the guy's asking too much money, they're fine with letting him walk. That's been the case for a long time. Forbert's a good depth defenseman. I think if they can keep him around, great. Shattenkirk, it's a 1-year deal. If he wants to stick around, fine. If not, that's fine too. And then you've got the Lucic situation where he's on a 1-year deal. He's away from the team. Not officially suspended that I've seen, but I don't think he comes back. I don't think he comes back to the Bruins. I think unless unless the charges go away, I don't think he's coming back to the Bruins, which is all right. The Lucic signing was, it was for depth forward up front, right? And I think it was also, there is some nostalgia to bringing back Lucic, which I think has been tarnished by the charge. So I do think that Lucic's season as a Bruin may very well already be finished. And then you got Sporel. Sporel, of course, part of the punchline from 2015 about how the Bruins, they screwed up at the draft and why did they draft who they drafted. The thing is, since 2015, they've done pretty well at the draft table, and Poitras and Beecher are two of the latest examples of how they do draft NHL players. They do a pretty good job with that. Yep, 2015 was a boneheaded move that I didn't like at the time that it happened. If I'd had a channel then, there probably would have been a lot of cussing going on in that video after that draft, because I wanted Barzal, I wanted Connor, and they didn't draft those guys, and I was like, what are you doing? Especially when you're drafting guys you could get in like the second or third round. But at any rate, once Sporel is out of the organization, then some of those comments probably go by the wayside. But yeah, Boston has come through that pretty darn well. And we can just look back and sort of shake our heads at what they did at the draft table in 2015. But you can also appreciate what they've done since then, right? With guys like Poitras. And then you got pending RFAs as well. Nothing major in the beginning here with Steen, Mitchell. Not going to be major raises. But you got Jeremy Swayman. Jeremy Swayman, it's a contract year. .932 save percentage. He's playing well. I think Swayman's worthy of a major paycheck out of that next contract, but he's a goaltender. So do you pay him the 8 years or do you pay him for 4? Do you give him, say, $5.5, $6 million for 4 years, or do you give him the maximum length contract? Swayman's a young goalie, so if they did go with the maximum length contract, I'm not going to be mad about it, but there's definitely risk there. Goaltender or not, there's definitely risk there. With Swayman, if he does end up being Vezina level, it's going to drive up his price a lot as an RFA. And then the question becomes, okay, so if you do sign Swayman to this big money contract, what happens then? Like, Bruins players do take a discount to stay in Boston over what they would get on the market. But at the same time, eventually you're going to run into cap problems if you have a really good team. We've seen that with Tampa. There are plenty of players with the Tampa Bay Lightning who are making less money. They have a lower cap hit than they would have if they'd gone to market and signed as a free agent. But once you get enough of those players making a lot of money, just not as much as they could have, eventually end up where you don't have any cap space. Boston's there right now, and Swayman needs a big raise. So even though the salary cap is supposed to go up next summer by about $4 million, it only mitigates some of the issues here for Boston, and we'll see how everything turns out. So with Boston, I'm definitely seeing them as a team that's a playoff team. Yep. First in the division may very well end up happening, although Florida's right there. I still think Toronto has a good chance of ending up being first. And the very unpredictable Tampa Bay Lightning, what could happen with them, we'll see. But this division's tough. And so if Boston ends up finishing first, that's great. But as we saw last year, finishing first doesn't necessarily mean success come playoff time. So let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. Are they contenders? There's my question. Are the Boston Bruins a contender? For me, I have to say, with the center depth position and some of the concerns I have, just of not having that big name down the middle, just of the fact that, this is a team that's definitely needing to play kind of a perfect game to get those wins. I don't know how sustainable that's going to be over the full length of the season and where they may end up. But let me know your thoughts in the comment section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. And don't worry, I will talk about other teams as well. I just felt like, I talked about Boston. Didn't really jinx Boston. I talked about Seattle. Didn't turn Seattle around, but you can't say I jinxed them. They weren't playing all that well when I did the video. But I'll talk about other teams too. So stay tuned for that. Thank you guys so much for all your support as always. And I will say, with the Centennial season for Boston, the jerseys are absolutely fantastic. I think what Boston's done with creating 3 jerseys for the Centennial, I think they've probably given some kind of pause to teams like Detroit and Chicago about when their Centennial rolls around, what they're going to do. Will they do the same thing, or will they say, no, that was Boston's thing, we're just going to have 1 jersey for the Centennial? I'll be interested to see what they do. But thank you guys so much for all your support as always. I will talk to you again soon.